Hi, folks. Welcome to the webinar today. Unlike the last one I did, we seem to be technically doing much better. So just a quick question. You have a chat window in front of you where you guys can type in the questions and I'll see them. Okay, so let me introduce myself and talk a little bit about what's going to happen. So my name is Gautam Bhan. I am faculty here at IHS, and I teach particularly on 2 or 3 types of things at IHS. One is I teach courses on urban identity, inequality, and selfhood. So I teach the units on caste, on gender, on religion, on sexuality, so on all aspects of identity in the city. I teach courses on housing, and that's the core part of the practice and research work that I anchor at IHS, particularly on questions of affordable and adequate housing. I also anchor and teach our courses on urban and planning theory. And I anchor and teach the courses on qualitative methods, research design, and framing research inquiries. So basically what that means is that in many ways across the curriculum, you'll see me pop in and out of the class, which is the way in which much of the fellowship works, most of the faculty. We all sort of collectively teach through the program in different ways. I'll give you a quick sense of my background in case it's useful later for some of the things you're thinking about. I was trained, the closest thing you can say is that I was trained as an urban sociologist. I have 2 degrees that say interdisciplinary social sciences on the diploma, which is a very good recipe to give your parents a whole lot of tension about what you're actually studying. So for many years, I was exactly that person who was told that I had no focus. But now when people look back, they say I have lots of breadth. So the good news is that it does get better in many different kinds of ways. And in both my degrees, what I was trying to figure out and think about was actually how to do something in my head I call development. So I started studying economics. I got very frustrated with guns and butter and assumptions and demand and supply curves. And so I started studying political science with economics and thought I had sort of solved it. And then in my 3rd year of college, I had a very, very fantastic professor who taught me feminist theory. And then everything sort of went ulta from there. And I ended up sort of trying to find my way navigating these 3 disciplines. And since then, and which is true of a lot of faculty at IHS, many of us ended up in our training doing multiple disciplinary work, trying to find places that brought them together. And the reason I share this background is to actually, in a sense, suggest to you that I resolved some of my problems. My PhD is in urban and regional planning. And it was in the PhD that I actually found a way to hold what I used to see as conflicting disciplines together, because the urban held them for me together in a way that made a lot of sense. Because there was no way in which one could understand or think about the city if one took discipline seriously. Because the city didn't take discipline seriously, problems didn't take discipline seriously, neighborhoods didn't take discipline seriously. Everything happened together and everything happened at once. And when you were working and living and being in those neighborhoods, in those cities, you had to think about what had to be done and what had to be known. You didn't think about where it came from and what method you were taught and what your degree was in. So a lot of the curriculum at IHS, including the Fellows Program, is built on this notion that the urban has the capacity to bring together disciplines in a way that is not just multidisciplinary, but interdisciplinary. And there is a difference between those 2 things. So let me talk a little bit about what the focus of today's webinar is, and I'll come back to the structure a little bit. And I'll just talk for another 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll spend the whole hour just listening to your questions, so that's what's more important. Okay, so one of the key elements that you guys will have seen looking at the program structure is the projects and the internships. Let me talk to you briefly about what these are. As you know, the curriculum is split into 3 components. You enter into an integrated term that you all take together, which is called the Commons, which is for us the base of our interdisciplinarity, because we invite you guys to come from different disciplines. We invite you to apply from any disciplines that you are in. But if we do that, then we have 35 people who've been selected precisely because they range from film studies via geology through economics to architecture. And the Commons is basically where you learn to speak a joint language of the urban across your disciplines. It's where we sort of teach the economist how to think spatially, we teach the architect how to think sociologically, we teach the sociologist how to think, period. And in many ways, that Commons period is our most structured part of the curriculum. When you get out of the commons, you go into the phase of it that we call the electives. So there are 4 elective choices you take, and you start splitting up, deciding and focusing in different ways on your own. In accompanying the elective is what we call the project. Now, the project is an interesting part. IHS as an institution is fundamentally based on the premise that there is not a tenable distinction between something called research and something called practice. And we do that partly because we don't believe that you can have forms of practice that don't involve the generation of knowledge, which is what research is, or forms of research that do not involve doing, which is what practice is. So one of the key ways of learning we have for our fellows is through doing, and to think and reflect while doing. So the project is the curriculum holder of this knowledge space. So what happens is that you join live projects at IHS. So you join projects across disciplines and scales that IHS is currently engaged in. Some are much more research-based, much more traditional field work. Some are much more applied. Some are design projects. Some are intervention projects. Some are government projects. Some are private. But every one of them has an external client. It has an external person who has contracted us for the work to whom we are accountable. These are ongoing live projects, so therefore they aren't studios or practica. There is no assignment or test or internal jury. There are real constraints. There are project briefs. There are limitations. There are budgets. There are time cycles. There are deliverables. Now, a lot of this for us is important because it is also the way in which we prepare our fellows to be professionals. And I think that there is a set of sensibilities you learn when having to do and work within constraints that are very important, and there are things that none of us can teach you in the classroom. We can't teach you how theoretical concepts of the ideal way to redevelop informal settlement get morphed and thwarted, even if, despite your best intention, because of the actual department you're working with in the actual month of May in an actual year in an actual place. The project lets you see that, and it lets you grapple with it, and it lets you grapple with it without answers. The projects are 2 days a week. So the regular cycle of a fellowship week is always classes from Monday to Wednesday. And then Thursday, Friday, you don't have structured classes. In the commons, you're in neighborhoods, you're in the practica in the field. And in the elective term, you're in your project. So 2 days a week is a significant amount of time. It's basically, you can imagine it as basically a 40% consultancy in the real world. It also is linked in January to 2.5, 3 weeks of structured field time, which allows you to make visits, to travel, to undertake deeper intensive project work. So it gives you a chunk of time to actually build up and do that, not just those 2 days a week, but in a concentrated phase. And almost all fellows will do at least some field travel that is supported by the projects and paid for by the projects. The range of projects I can tell you from this year's fellows, we have a project in which we are redesigning the outpatient departments of 12 district hospitals in UP, and our client is the government of UP, the Department of Health. So 2 of our fellows became part of that project, went for their field to Lucknow, worked in OPDs, did surveys, understood maps, drew maps, and then gave a design intervention, very specific, to redesign the 2 bathrooms of a particular hospital in Hazratganj. Now, this is a very particular but very, very fascinating form of practice, because nothing tells you about whether an outpatient department in a government hospital works than if the loo is clean. We had fellows who worked on developing and running workshops for housing rights activists in Ranchi and Indore for them to be technically more suited and sound in their knowledge of master planning. We had folks who worked on disaster projects doing profiles of leadership in disaster and risk management organizations in Upper Assam. We had folks that worked on climate change. We had folks that worked on migration. We had folks that worked on design. We had folks that worked on film. We had folks that worked on better communication for public health messaging, for urban informal sector workers, women who were domestic workers, construction workers with small children. So what you'll see is that the range of projects is actually very vast. On the Urban Fellows website right now, you can see a full list of these projects, and I encourage you to check them out. The projects are distinct from the second element that we're going to talk about in today's webinar, which is the internship. The internship is a 2-month full-time placement in March and April at the end of your fellowship. So the 9-month fellowship is actually 7 months in residence, fully taught in Bangalore, and then in the 2 months you go away. The distinction of that internship from just a job is that we guarantee that internship. And what we mean by that is we have a list of about 40 organizations that have agreed to take our fellows for 2 months. These range from large-scale infrastructure firms like Tolberg and CBRE Richard Ellis and FSG to large movement organizations like MKSS and the School for Democracy in Rajasthan, social sector organizations like Yuva, technical organizations like WASAN and What Engineering Works, planning firms like Adapt, ecological conservation societies. We've sent fellows for internships to the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration in Mussoorie, where the IS officers are taught. Folks have gone to intern with the Department of Municipal Administration in the government of Karnataka, the Department of Urban Land Transport. So public, private, civil society. The range of organizations is really quite vast. Some folks also choose to use that time to do more independent work, particularly those that are more academically inclined. So it is possible for you to do an independent project in those 2 months, but you have to convince a faculty committee that you're ready for it and that you have a sound proposal. So we're a bit tough on that. We don't quite let folks go that easily. We also every year incubate one fellow's startup idea, which basically means that there is an idea that they have and they need a little bit of money to get it going. So last year we incubated a company that still exists called Urban Play that makes board games in order to do discourse awareness on urban issues. So 2 of our fellows didn't want to write a paper basically for my class and asked me if they could make a board game instead. And the class I was teaching was an identity. And so they made a board game on disability in the city, where basically through a character, you had to perform a certain set of tasks, and the city's map was the board game. And then they made board games for every assignment, mostly I'm convinced because they didn't want to write. But it was their choice, and they became very good at it. And then they decided they actually wanted to do this. And so both of them still make games and use that for schools, for education, for public advocacy and the like. And we supported them with training, with money, with office space for their internship. This year's incubation is an experiment in creating a self-sustaining urban ecological garden. And so basically on the roof of the campus building, one of our fellows built a mixed species ecological garden that needed to be watered only once a week and use no fertilizers and no pesticides. So it was a self-sustaining, self-regulating garden. And in a month and a half, he basically grew a gigantic mixed forest, and he experimented with the right things. And he's doing it because he wants to start an enterprise that does this. So he's now interning with gardeners who are part of Hasrudalla, which is Bangalore's largest waste pickers and waste entrepreneurs collective. So the internships are very much your pathways out from the fellowship into employment. You know that we don't guarantee employment in the fellowship, but we work very closely with you to get you into networks that make that employment possible. So there's a lot of support around it. A third of the fellows tend to get absorbed into the internship sites. That's what we've seen over the last 2 batches, and many then proceed to move on. And in many ways, that internship period is a place where you have to create a freestanding substantive output that also helps you begin to apply and move back from an interdisciplinary space into a sectoral workspace. So those are the 2 elements that I wanted to talk about in some detail. I'll open it up now because these webinars are really about your questions. You don't have to just ask questions about the projects of the internships. You can ask about anything you like, about the application, about where you are, about what you're doing, about any part of the faculty. You can ask me anything about my experience or role in the program. So basically, it's an open session, but I wanted to highlight these 2 elements of the curriculum, the projects that are part of your teaching through the electives, and the internship that I offer full-time placements in March and April. And if you go to the website, you'll see a set of organizations that give you a set of the range of places that take internships every year, though they do change in many ways. One last point about the internship. As part of the fellowship, for fellows who don't get paid from the interns or organization they're interning, we provide a base minimum stipend. Because what we don't want is we don't want you to not intern at a place which can't afford to pay you. Because if we did that, no one would ever intern with movements, no one would ever intern with grassroots organizations, no one would ever take a risk on anything. So we provide that base stipend, then we ensure that everybody gets it. And then depending every year on who gets how many internships, we try and even top up some of what you're getting from the organization so you have a little bit of money in hand. Yes, So let me stop there. So feel free to jump in and just type in your questions into that. I'll read the questions out loud and then I'll respond to them. Cool. All right, floor is yours. Okay, so Akash is asking, I come from a product and interaction design background. I'm interested in learning urban planning by applying design thinking methods. I want to know what kind of future companies I can be part of. It's an interesting question. I think actually, so we've had designers of various kinds being the program every year, from product to furniture to visual to graphic to urban. So the whole range actually from on that. And they've gone on to do different things. So a lot of it actually really depends, Akash, on whether you're trying to stay within your field or you're coming to the fellowship in order to differentiate or nuance your relationship to design in some way. So in general, for all of you guys as well, there tends to be two kinds of folks who come to the fellowship. There's folks who come in with a strong skill set that is often disciplinary or technical. And what they want is a kind of top up or framing around that skill set so it feels less narrow, but they don't want to step away from that. So they want to remain designers, but have different frames and scales of reference, particularly different theoretical frames of reference, for example. And they tend to then work in firms that are sometimes similar, sometimes not so similar to where they would have gone anyway, but they distinguish themselves from their peers because of their, a lot of it is because of their work time with us. So for example, you're a journalist, you go back to a newspaper, but you go back to be the urban reporter, you do their urban beat, so you specialize because of the fellowship. So part of the question of where you want to apply design actually depends on what shifts in your design thinking in your fellowship year. If it shifts in a way that you move up scale, then actually planning firms will open up to you. Firms in mid-sized practice firms will open up to you in different ways. So in many places, research will open up to you. For example, it could be a mode where design thinking we use a lot in the fellowship. So a lot of it depends actually on what happens to you as you shift through the fellowship and where you want to pick it up. The designers of this batch have, one of them has done a complete shift and moved away from design much more towards communication research, and particularly development communication. And another one has actually stayed very much in design, but now applies and, so for example, is working with us to develop. One of the projects we're doing is to design what we call baby boxes. So basically portable places that are cribs, but can also be carried for women who are construction and domestic workers, so they can keep their babies with them when they work. So sort of she's coming in and applying her design thinking into that project. So a lot of the stuff that changes will depend a lot on you, but design is a fantastic base to move into many kinds of ways. The question is what you want to do when post the fellowship. Okay, so Ayush is saying, can we pick the organizations we intern with? How does the assigning of internships and projects work? Yeah, it's a good question. So you apply. So you give preferences, typically first, second, and third. And then we set up an interview with the organization because there needs to be a fit between you and the organization. And it is between the interview is not a selection process so much because they are already committed to taking you guys. But what they do is they try and see that there's an expectation alignment between the times. We work quite hard with the organizations to ensure everyone gets their first preference as much as possible. It doesn't always happen. So because there are many places, many intern fellows who want to go to the same organization, and the organization chooses. We don't exercise any choice. We present all the CVs that come to us. So in this year's batch, I would say about 70% of folks got their first choice, and no one didn't get either their second or their third choice. So it worked out pretty well in that way. So it is. You do sign up, you do a preference-based ranking, and you are open to getting first, second, or third. But so far, it's worked pretty decently. All right, so Kedar wants to know, can you elaborate a little bit on the elective modules offered at the fellowship? Do they change every year? Yes, they do. So there are 4 electives, and that means there's 4 slots. These are very intensive, basically immersive studios. So they're 2 weeks, flat out, really kind of nuts. And what they do is that they give you a very deep sense of a work of a sector, right? Either a sector or a kind of thematic. So for example, you can have a very particular sectoral elective on sanitation, very focused on the sanitation cycle, nothing else, won't even do water, right? Unless it impacts sanitation. You can have something as a theory elective that is much broader, like These are the electives we've taught, like Reading the City or Southern Urban Theory, that are much more open. You have some things that are in the middle. For example, this year's elective was a methodological elective that Solly Benjamin taught on spatial stories. So actually the elective was on the idea of a technique. So what happens is that in each of the slots, 2 or 3 electives are offered and you pick. Here, you pretty much get what you want. There aren't any limits about it. The only time we don't offer an elective is if less than 4 out of 35 people pick it, then we don't offer it, but that's never happened. So what you end up doing is that in each elective cycle, you make a choice of 1 elective. You do 1 at a time. You can't do more because they're really full-time intense electives. They're full immersions. So you end up doing 4 over your time, and you'll pick 4 from a total of somewhere between 8 and 10. So that's the kind of choice you get. They do change every year, but every year you will get certainly 3 kinds of electives. You'll get sectoral electives, sanitation, housing, transportation, energy, so very specific professional urban sectors in the way they're organized in the world. You'll certainly get some electives on media, culture, Reading the City, urban theory, and you'll get a set of methodological electives that are much more about ways of thinking and working as they are about elsewhere. So we make sure that we offer each kind of elective, but which specific elective gets offered tends to change year after year. Samir is saying, I'm in the current final year of BArch. I plan to venture into urban designing. How would I benefit from this course? What are the possible internships for a student in my field? Okay, so we get a bunch of architects who apply. We don't take all of them. And partly we don't do that because we want the architects who come to us to know that if they're looking for a specialization in architecture, we may not be the best fit for you. This is not a place you're going to come in where your architectural skills are going to deepen. What's going to happen is the exact opposite, which is that your skill training in architecture will get really challenged, and it'll get challenged from multiple disciplinary positions. You'll be forced to think beyond the site. You'll be forced to think about the scale of the city. We will ask you to resist using the methods you already know, the drawing and technical skills you already know, and take on methods you've never done, like ethnographic methods, or geospatial methods, or economic methods, or valuation methods, or policy analysis. So you get pushed in very different kinds of ways. So the question of the benefit from the course, I will turn it around to you. Think about what makes you want to come. You've got a degree in architecture, and now you want to come to an interdisciplinary urban course. Something must make you want to do that. So if wanting to move beyond what you know is what you're looking for, then we're a good fit for you. If you're quite clear that you want to do architecture and design, then I would think about it, because then I think there are courses like master's courses in design that will give you specialist knowledge that we will not give you. So think about what makes you want to apply to an interdisciplinary course. Think about how it will frame and contextualize your architectural training. Think about what you will gain. And as for the internships you get, it's going to be exactly like what I was telling Akash. It depends on what you're looking for. There are lots of architectural firms that offer internships, but the firms that are on our list will not give you a standard architectural internship. They'll want to use your new training. So they're going to be quite distinct, and you may find yourself wanting to do anything but an architectural internship after 7 months. That's the point about interdisciplinarity. So you'll have a choice. Again, that same set. You can stay in your field, refract a little bit, change, but remain core to your disciplinary training, or you can actually really do a big shift. And that will determine which kind of internships that you go. Okay, Kedar is saying, does every fellow have to take at least 1 elective that fits the categories you listed? No. The categories are for us. It just means that should you want to chart a course through the year that makes you want to do different things, then that's that you should have that option. Should you want to do only sectoral electives because you really want depth in one sector and you don't want to take courses that sound very technical, you are free to. I mean, so everyone has a faculty advisor through the program, and each fellow sort of takes the help of that advisor to craft their elective choices. So we don't have any pattern or any sub-constraints on the choices you take in the electives. The only constraints are scheduling. So in each cycle, a particular set of electives are offered, and you have to take one of those. Other than that, there's no other constraints in the choice. Okay, Mukund is saying, what has been your experience working with the government departments, ministries? How much are they receptive to the ideas of external consultants, researchers? Mukund, this is an existential question about my life, so it's entirely unfair to ask, but I will answer it anyway. What do you say about working with government? It's the best and the worst thing you'll ever do. It's utterly pointless and deeply meaningful. It is not worth doing, and it is the only thing worth doing. That's honestly the truth of it. There is nothing that you can say about working with government that's not true. The only thing that I will say is that the one thing that I know for sure is that if you have a set of belief in public systems, the public system has to work. You can't be anti-privatization and anti-state, because then no one is delivering the water. And so therefore, there is a strong commitment among many people at IHS to work to make public systems work better. So we run something called the Urban Practitioners Program, which trains government officers from the levels of municipal junior engineers to IS officers. About 1,000 government officers in 8 states go through our classrooms every year. 2-day courses, 3-day courses, 5-day courses. We train for the housing mission, we train for the service mission, we train for Swachh Bharat. So no matter what we think of those programs, we are committed to the fact that the state has to be held accountable to the delivery of urban services. So I have worked with government officers that are incredibly receptive, with whom you can move very quickly, very fast. I've worked with folks who have thrown me out of the room. It is almost impossible to know which will come, but learning how to work within the government is a key part of something you learn in the fellowship. So yeah, it's a mixed blessing, but we keep doing it. Okay. So Akash is saying, what are your thoughts on digital, mobile, interactive kiosk, future solutions for urban problems? How efficient do they turn out in the real world? Any good examples to look up to? Look, I think the digital is very real. I went to a very interesting talk the other day by Shiv Vishwanathan. And he actually, it was a movement meeting on participation, on participatory democracy. And the question he asked was very interesting. He said, what is your theory of participation as you move from an oral era to a print era to a digital era? And he was making a very fundamental point. He's like, you can't have the same theory of participation when the mode of knowledge and information has so fundamentally changed. I know nothing that has changed our cities more fundamentally than the mobile phone. I work largely in Bastis. And what's fascinating to me is that the single most dominant mode of communication in informal settlements is WhatsApp audio, right? It's not, because these are folks who don't write, and they don't certainly write using English alphabets or using Devanagari. This is the North India Delhi context I'm talking about, so Devanagari is relevant. But audio messages on WhatsApp are how I communicate with everybody who is meant to be on the wrong side of the digital divide, which I keep hearing about theoretically, but I cannot find anywhere in any city. I can't find this digital divide that's meant to exist. And so I think that there is something fundamental about the digital, but I would flip the question to take it even broader to what you're saying. One is the instrumental use of the digital as a mode of delivery. Can it help me target better? Can I get information better? Digital transfers, automatic banking, cashless. But I'm actually asking a much more fundamental question, is saying, what has the digital done to us as an urban society? What is it doing to your sense of self? What is it doing to the sense of the economy? What is it doing to production? What is it doing to manufacturing? What is it doing to our theories of how things are supposed to work? I think the digital is pretty much fundamentally structural in what we're doing, and cities are pretty much at the forefront of so many of these things. So yeah, so, there's a lot to unpack there. Okay, okay. Amrinder is saying the application is a part where the applicant has to present one project they've been part of. Can you elaborate on the various range of ways in which the project can be presented? Text, photographs, what is advisable? Okay, good question. So Amrinder, there is no single format that there's no single format that we prescribe. So we get architectural portfolios, we get Vimeo clips of people who make films, we get long academic essays, we get blogs, we get newspaper articles, we get diary jottings, we get so in terms of form, absolutely no discrimination, no hierarchy. And basically we have your application, every application is read by at least 4 faculty members at IHS. So between us, we have the expertise to read and evaluate different samples of work across disciplines. So I don't worry about that. What should you send? I'll give you 2 pieces of advice. Don't try and dazzle us. we are not interested in being amazed by spectacular work. We want to see the way you think. We want to see, I would be very happy to have a paper where I can see someone struggling to write a complex thing, but it feels like them. We're not looking for polish. We're not looking for sheen. So we get a lot of architectural portfolios drowning in 3D renderings that, and we know what they are. But if you show me a process diagram in that same rendering, you show me some haath ka kaam where you actually, I want your thinking process. So if you can give us samples of work that show us how you think, they will always stay with us more than clean, polished, sophisticated final outputs. Second thing, if you send us work that is group or teamwork, write a note to us about what your role was, because we can look at a project and look at your application and we know that there's no way that you did that alone. But we have no way of knowing if you were the least important person in the team or the most important person in the team. So define your role in a group project if you're submitting a sample of work that is not just you. We don't hold teamwork against you. We value teamwork greatly. We just want a sense of what you did. So the third part is, then it really comes up to you to see what is the sample of work that you have written, drawn, textual, that you feel really represents a combination of the way you think and your curiosity and where you want to go, and gives us some sense of what you already know how to do. And that's really what we're looking for in those two. So I hope that answers that. Otherwise, ask me a follow-up and I'll pick it up. Okay, Mukund is saying nice things, but I won't read them because they're not a question. Will candidates that do not make it past a written application be informed? Are only shortlisted candidates informed via email? You will be informed either way. So we typically interview about 15% of our applications, no more than that. So it is a big cut. So it is something to think about. But yes, you will be told in either way. And I think that the deadlines, the interview shortlist, I think the dates are on the website in the admission process. And we tend to be very close to them. We may slip by a day or two, but it won't be longer than that. Okay, Mindy is saying thanks. You're welcome. And I am currently at the end of my questions, so I will take just a pause before you guys write. Welcome. When you submitted your application, it should have said that it was submitted, right? You got a screen saying that your application has been submitted. That's typically usually enough. But, okay, Mukund Singh, would you like to tell us about the most impactful thing you've done in your professional life? The correct answer that everyone would like me to say in the webinar is taught in the Urban Fellowship Program at IHS, which has been the most deep, meaningful, impactful part of my life. No, I'm serious, actually. I think I was the 5th person that started at IHS. So we were part of a small team of us that were there at the beginning many years ago, not that many years ago, a few years ago. And we're now about 170 people in 4 cities. So I think in many ways, I had the way we used to teach cities used to drive me mad. And it used to drive me mad because of how narrowly reductive it was to the spatial sciences of planning, architecture, and design. So I think the chance to craft new curriculum in teaching, for me, has been the most meaningful thing that I have done in my professional life. I would say that. Akash, are there any student exchange projects or programs during the fellowship, considering the kind of urban design work happening abroad? No, not in this one, because we have you only for 7 months, so it's a tight thing. In the proposed IHS Masters program, so they're there, because we have 2 years there, but not in this one. No. Mukund is asking about outside of IHS. I would say, I think that I have learned the most professionally from being part of social movements that have organized around and against evictions. I think more than anything, I don't know if I was impactful in them, but I think I learned the most about cities in my life by being part of those campaigns. So I think that would be the most impactful thing for me. Okay. Samir is asking, apart from the fellowship program, what are the employment opportunities at IHS? It's a big question. There are several. We do have a very current internship and vacancies page. So I haven't looked at it recently. I know that my team in Delhi has about 6 or 7 positions that we have on offer. We hire in research, we hire in practice. So take a look at those, and I think those are a good place to look. I will say one thing, and it isn't a direct response to your question, Samir, but it made me think about it because we had a fellow who applied last year that I think struggled with this. Studying at IHS is not working at IHS. And I think that this is a distinction you should keep in mind. And I think there are folks who apply to the fellowship thinking that it's akin to that, and it's not. And so I think it's an important thing for you to keep in mind. We work very differently. I mean, one of the things that all the fellows from this batch will tell you is that the way we teach is very different from the way we are in the project. And that's because you see a very different side of us. I think it's a good learning thing. But yeah, so just look at the careers page on that for employment stuff, but keep the distinction in your head. Is interning at IHS an option at the end of the fellowship? Do you mean after you, as your intern, the 2-month internship, that's part of the fellowship, or after you graduate? Just clarify that. While Kedar just clarifies that internship question, I will, yeah, I understand that. So let me just take Akash's question first. So if a fellow discovers a problem and works through the solution and needs incubation to bring it to the real world, how does IHS help? So you are invited to pitch an incubation proposal to us. We fund it, we give you money to survive for a couple of months where you pitch it. We give you advice and mentorship to develop a business proposal and a pitching plan. We give you a office space, and we give you mentorship, space, seed funding, and development advice. So in both cases, it's been quite good, but it really does have to pass the bar of a faculty committee's approval that it's an idea that can be immediately realized. But we're very open to it. So yeah. So Kedar, can you intern at IHS? Yes, you can. We don't always encourage it because we want a sense of why you're staying. And if you're just staying to avoid going back to the real world, then we push you out. But if we have a sense that you have a project that works well, so we allowed 3 fellows this year out of 30 to continue their internship at IHS because each of them have been part of IHS projects, right, during the project term, and had come to a point where a couple of months more work would give them a very substantial output of their own. And so if that's the case, then we're okay with it. The reason we discourage it is not because we're not happy to have you. The reason we discourage it is that if you're looking particularly to join a particular kind of job after the fellowship, you lose an opportunity to build your CV by going somewhere other than IHS, because to an external person, a project within IHS is indistinguishable from a fellowship. They don't see it differently. So you have to be okay with taking that call. But yes, you can intern at IHS in those projects that you've been part of or in a new project, but you have to make a case, and it is a minority of fellows who choose to do so. Okay, so Ayush is saying, I'm an environmental engineer with interest in policy and urban governance. Do you think the UFP is an apt fit for me? I mean, you sound like a bunch of our fellows, so I would say yes. In many ways, prima facie, it's a really good fit. So see, this is the kind of articulation I think that is useful. So you say you're an environmental engineer, but your interest is in policy and governance. So that's a good reason to come to the fellowship, because you've got a base knowledge in environmental engineering, you've got topics and thematics to care about, but you want a way to scale that away and think about policy and governance as a space you want to impact. There, then you will get multiple ways in the fellowship to think about how one works on policy and governance. I mean, we all want to work on policy, but what does that mean? How do you get there? Who do you need to know? What do you need to know? If someone left policy to you, would you know what to say? Do you want that responsibility? Should you have it? So this is a good way to think about why a fellowship top-up makes sense. So you are you take your core engineering degree, you put it in the urban, and then you surround yourself with other folks working on questions of policy and governance. So IHS is a particularly good place to pick up environmental policy. We do a lot of work in climate change. Our director is one of the lead authors on the urban chapter of the IPCC. We're part of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. We teach on sustainable cities. We do a lot of work on the environment side of things. So in that sense, it's a very good fit. But remember, for yourself, ask yourself why this and not, say, a master's in environmental policy. Right? So that would be, again, a policy move, but narrower. This would be a policy move, but more broad. Both have pluses and minuses. So just compare those options for you and see what fits for where you are in your life. Okay. Okay, so Jyoti is saying, is it very difficult to get selected for the program as you get a huge number of applications every year? Yes. I don't know how else to say it. So we admit about 5% of the applications, somewhere between 3 and 5%. So it is a competitive fellowship. At the same time, unless you apply, you don't even get into the game. So my suggestion, don't think about the odds, don't think about the numbers, they don't help you write good applications. Write an application that is true and honest about who you are, and most importantly, when writing the application, show us that you are curious, that you are passionate, and that you have thought about why you want to do this fellowship. The most important question in your application is why you want to be an urban fellow. Because what we want to know is that you've looked at the curriculum, you've looked at the structure, you understand what we are and what we're not. If we get an application where it looks like you're really looking for deep sectoral knowledge, or you think you're getting an equivalent master, we'll say no. What we want is someone who says, I get this interdisciplinary exploration, I get this fellowship, I want to be in a place where everyone around me thinks differently. I don't need all of it to add up in one sector. I want my mind to expand. I need more focus. I need a new move. I need to find myself. Good answers. So focus on that. Don't think about the competitiveness. It's a tough fellowship, but we haven't read your application yet. So if it stands out, it'll work. Okay, good luck. Okay, so Kedar is saying thanks. Yes, I don't read the nice things people say, but your work. Okay, Ishak is saying, I'm an architect and urban designer by training. I'm eager to explore opportunities beyond traditional design-based practice and more towards research and academia. How much of relevance will this fellowship have in that direction? What's the mode of assessment for the modules? So this is a very good answer to why you want to be a fellow, right? You're a designer and architect by training. You want to go beyond that traditional practice and move more towards broader conceptual frames in research and academia and the urban. So fellowship is tailor-made for you. This will work very well. This is exactly what you should say to us, because that's the right fit, right? Because this is what we can give you very easily. We can take your core and expose you to a wider range of thinking about the urban. The mode of assessment varies by module. There are some things that we leave you with a lot of freedom to do. There are some things that we insist. So in the commons and the early skill labs, the assessments are quite structured because we need you to show us that you get the basics. In the electives, they become more and more varied, and then they depend on faculty. So if you had been in my housing module last year, you would have had to make a pitch to a local government about what to do with an informal settlement in Bangalore. If you had been in the sanitation elective, you would have written a policy brief. If you had been in the media, you would have written either a critical review of 3 films or have made a short 2.5-minute film. If you were in the quantitative skills labs, you have to run the Excel pivot and show me the results. If you're in the geospatial lab, you've got to make the map on your own. So it really ranges in terms of assessment, but I will say that our notion, our relationship to assessment is this. You need a way to know where you are. You need a way to know what you know. You need to have a way to know how you're changing and how far you've come. That's the assessment that matters. So two times in the year, we will bring you in for a 15-minute interview with 3 faculty members. And we'll basically ask you and say, tell us how you're doing. Tell us how you think you're doing. That is the most important assessment you'll do in the fellowship, because you'll assess yourself. Because the big question in the end is, it's not a marks exam, and no one gives a shit, honestly. But it is critically important for you to have ways to recognize how your knowledge set is changing. And that's very important for us to see. So our assessment culture is based on that principle. We're not wedded to a particular mode. And if there's something like the board games, the board games came up because they said, I don't want to write, I want to do a board game. Let's do it. The point is, I want to see you engage with the ideas. And I want you to see that you can engage with the ideas and you can think about it a certain way. Okay. Ayush is saying, what is the interview like? What sort of questions will be asked? A lot of it derives from your application. We'll talk to you about your essay. We'll talk to you about the urban problem you pitched. We'll talk to you about why you want to come. We will get a sense of the fact that we'll see the difference between you and writing and you in person. We want to know a lot more about your motivations in coming to the program. So the interview is more a confirmation than an assessment. We want a sense of the person we read in the application. We also know that some people just do much better in the interview than in the writing, and some people do much better in the writing than the interview. So it gives us a sense of your ability to the complete picture of you as an applicant comes between those two modes. And so there's nothing rocket sciencey about it. There are no trick questions. It's very easy. It's like a 15-20 minute informal chat. It's it's not like this actually, except that instead of me talking at you, you get to talk at me. So there is literally nothing you can do to prepare for your interview except read your application and read your essay, because that's where we will start. We will get a sense of how you think on your feet. We will get a sense of how you think through problems. And what we really want to hear from you is just get a sense of the way you think. That's really quite blunt. Ishaq, as part of the sample project, is it better to send an academic project or an architectural portfolio? It's really up to you. I mean, one is not necessarily better than the other. Pick the one that you think of. It's not a project or a portfolio. It's your project and your portfolio. Pick the one that you think shows more of you. And again, not in the technical skill set. Pick the one that shows us more of your sensibility, your relationship to questions, how you think about the city, to your essay. So pick the one that feels more true, the one that you actually, here's the thing. Pick the one you like. Don't pick the one you think is good. Pick the one that actually you really like, that you enjoy doing, that you think is actually good, that you would show to a friend and say, this is what I do. Say you met a new person and you weren't applying for an interview, it wasn't competitive, and you wanted to give them a sense of what you did. Pick the project you would show that friend. Don't pick the project you would show your boss. That's my advice. Okay. Akash says, what's the learnings from running of the last 2 years and what are the changes you plan for this year? This year is very similar to last year, because we changed the program a lot between year 1 and year 2. We fixed a lot of things. We didn't have a project in the first year. We didn't have a break for the field work. Our assessment structure was a bit off. So I think that in many ways we changed a significant set of things for this year's batch, and so we're going to go pretty much with the same program, because I think we want time to consolidate those learnings. And it went very well, much more smoothly on the things we wanted to fix. The only change we've done this year from last year is that we've given fellows more time to do extended field work in different sites as part of their project. So basically January gets totally clean for you. And otherwise, I think the program at this point now is in a place where we can run it for a couple of years before anything substantial changes. Oh, and then I was saying, will there be an engagement with the government bodies? Lots, as much as you want. We work very closely with the government in different places, and so if you want to be in a place where you engage with the government a lot, so IHS is a Center for Excellence with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. We also have direct MOUs with 7 states for capacity building. We work with the Department of Housing in Karnataka, we work with the Department of Land and the Departments of Defense. So we are very integrated into the public system at different levels, and so you will see it in all our work. And if working with the government is something that you want to do, you will get many chances to plug into it during the fellowship. Okay, so closing thought. Don't apply on April 16th. Just trust me, whatever you do, don't do it. Because no matter how much one prepares, there is just technically nothing we can do to completely be prepared for the fairly, I must say, ridiculous number of applications that come on the last day. So I'm not saying apply tomorrow, but apply on the 14th, apply on the 15th. Nothing will change in your application, and it will help you not get stuck in case something technical happens when 300 people try and submit at the same time. Okay, so save yourself the stress. Don't apply. We had applications that came in at 4:59 for a 5 o'clock deadline. Don't be that person. It's really just not worth it. Okay, and because if something glitches at that point, with all our best intentions, I'm not going to be around to save you. And quite honestly, and you can get a taste of me as a faculty right now, at that point, I have that much sympathy for you. Just about that much, really not that much more. Because if you're going to apply for this program for a year of your life, 1 minute before the deadline, there's other things you should be worrying about. Okay, so don't apply on the last day. Just apply on the last weekend. If you can apply before, nothing like it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then the last part of the application, guys, is don't try and game it. Don't try and sound impressive. Don't try and write in a way you don't write. Don't use big words that you don't normally use. Write like yourselves. We do not need this to be a René Martin lesson in grammar. I don't care if your English is not great. I don't care if your article. Just write honestly. If we can see the content, if we can see the thoughts, then you're fine. Okay, so this is not a place where sophistication is going to. We get very sophisticated applications from people who go to the top universities in the world, and it's all kinds of very smooth writing, and there is zero soul, and none of those people get it. So we don't, I mean, for good or bad, don't actually care where you went to college, and we don't actually care how many marks you got. We actually care if you can tell us right now where you are in your life. This is what you are grappling with. This is what you have to know. This are the questions that are driving you mad. This is what you care about. This is what you give a damn about. You communicate that passion to us in an application, and you will have your best shot. Okay, we're not looking for you to dazzle us. You're applying to be students, so we just want to see that you want to learn, and that you're really coming in open for this specific kind of interdisciplinary learning at this stage in your life. And that's about it. You do that and you'll have a really good shot. Okay, I think I will take that there. So remember that there is a specific webinar on law on Thursday, and other webinars that go through. Drop in a line to the info, and I'm going to ask you to do something that will be surprising to you in the era of competitive exams, so that we can actually build a more collaborative society. Is please also share information about the program with people who may not yet have heard of it or applied. Right? I think it's a good thing to do, and it'll karma points you'll get for it will only strengthen your application in many ways, and we will be at least in 1% a slightly less horrible and scary world where everyone's just trying to top the exam and kill everybody else. All right, okay, guys. Have what day is it today? Tuesday. Have a very good rest of your Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday. Whatever day it is. Have a good rest of your day. Good luck with your applications. Don't apply on the last day, and pop into the other webinars as you need if you need anything specific. Okay, Tanvi, have I forgotten anything that I should be saying before we sign off?
No, nothing. No.
All right, guys, take care, goodbye, and hopefully see some of you in the application reading portal when all of them come in. Take care, bye-bye.